privacy has just absolutely exploded, in the last, 3, 4 years, starting, of course, with GDPR. How did we get here? Why is this happening, and why is this happening now?
Yeah, so I guess in Europe, we've been thinking about this for a very long time, haven't we? With the sort of explosion of technology and this ability for supercomputers to process huge volumes of data about individuals, the Europeans started to think about the impact on the kind of the human rights, the rights and freedoms that this may have. Going back to the days of the Second World War, where certain information about individuals could be used to discriminate against them, and wanting to put in place safeguards in this respect. So the European approach has been very much considering data protection and privacy as a fundamental human right. The US takes a slightly different approach. It's more sort of sectorial. So looking at sort of financial services or healthcare, and considering the impact that individuals may suffer if information is in that particular context, in education and financial services in relation to health. But I think it's really been the explosion of social media sites, and the understanding, if you like, the awareness of just how much information organizations can hold on us. It becomes very personal. It's about when you browse a website, the information in terms of your personal habits that can be picked up, where you go shopping and you use a card, how that information can be used to profile you, and I guess just how that can impact your day-to-day life. And just as you say, in the last few years, there's been so many media stories. It's become something that's so central, really, to us, that there has been this awareness, almost like an awakening of, goodness me, there is huge, huge opportunity in all of this, but huge potential for harm also, if the right are not put in place.
Right. So in short, the internet created a vast accumulation of personal information that organizations were using in a manner to drive revenue, right, to drive income, which wasn't being communicated to the people whose information it was, and often would potentially hurt them, right? I mean, effectively, is that a decent summary?
Yeah, I guess it was the lack of transparency and accountability around it was really what was the focus, and the awareness around the lack of transparency and accountability. So going back to what I said about the European approach and this recognition that actually it was more governments and public authorities had so much power through the data that they had, that there had to be accountability and frameworks in place that protected the rights of individuals, so those rights weren't abused. And
so
it's
that's interesting. So on your side of the pond, it was the government, that you were protecting yourself against, and on our side of the pond, it was capitalism.
Well, so it starts with governments and public bodies, but then it flows to private organizations, because in a sense it was thought, well, if we're holding our governments to account, well, when you look at private organizations, they have as much, if not more, data visibility of what we do in our private lives and in day to day, and actually they should be held to the same standards. And in the US, there's that recognition as well. It's sort of this idea that consumers have to be protected against abuses that may take place if there isn't the safeguards, the degree of transparency that's required around the handling of data. And if governments are held to account, certainly private organizations should be held to account in the same way.
Yeah, that was incredibly well said. And I got a funny little story that you'd appreciate, being a privacy person. I was talking with a person who worked for an organization, and they prided themselves on taking anonymized data from multiple sources and then combining it back and de-anonymizing it to a point where they could identify the individuals. which is nutty. And then they were selling that data. And the guy gave an example of one of the things they were most proud of, where he said that, based on this data, we can determine when couples are heading towards divorce.
Yeah.
And we sell that information to divorce attorneys to market to them. So I think, to your point, that is a clear abuse of our personal information and preying on people at a point which is a very difficult time of their life.
Indeed. And there's so much information that can be discerned from our shopping habits, from our browsing habits, from the sort of the
That
loyalty.
someone has like a problem with drinking a lot of Prosecco. I mean, that might be something that somebody could pick up on.
Indeed, indeed.